It's talking about your feelings, not isolating, recognizing in yourself when you are isolating or you're experiencing anxiety, and then learning what relieves that for you. For some people, it's fresh air, it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's talking to people. Sometimes it's figuring out ways to build some self care into your time.
Welcome to Shaping the Base, and I'm here today with Abbie McClung. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're,
Honored.
we're going to talk about all kinds of things, but you are a city council member.
Correct. For
Uh,
word four.
yeah, public relations for KBBH,
Yes.
and a mom.
Yes.
All important roles. But when we were talking a little bit beforehand, you did mention that you had some leadership lessons from being a mom of a child with type 1 diabetes. And I just want to jump in and start with that because I'm interested.
Yes, thank you. And it's something anyone who knows me knows that I can direct most conversations back to type 1 diabetes advocacy in some way. And I think a lot of leadership lessons can also come back to parenting. Not that anybody wants to be parented by their peers or people in authority figures over them, but people are generally the same. And parenting is very much like leadership. And so I think with type 1 diabetes, particularly, I'm training up another leader. Like my son Finn was diagnosed when he was 5, just right before spring break in kindergarten. Just a little guy. Probably one of the last times I picked him up, because now he's 6'2", was carrying him into the emergency department. And that began this whole process of him needing to be able to do that on his own, to manage his blood sugar, to manage the prescriptions, the devices, to know how to count carbs in what he's eating. And so training him up to eventually do that on his own. Very similar to teaching him to drive, because this is now over 10 years ago that he was diagnosed. And what I was sharing before we started is that when you find yourself in a chaotic situation, whether it's a type 1 diabetes diagnosis or no one around you is driving right, because we all think that, right? We're the only one doing the right thing and the people around us are creating chaos, that you can always take a break from that, that most of the time you don't have to do anything right now. And so lots of leadership lessons through type 1 and lots of inspiration around what people are capable of, and then what happens in community, that you get by on the grace of people who have done it before you.
I, man, there's so many things to explore in that. But one thing I'm curious about is type 1 and type 2 diabetes. What's the difference?
Such a great question. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease. It is not caused by diet or lifestyle, and you can't prevent it, you can't cure it, and you can't reverse it. Type 2 diabetes, there's a genetic predisposition. You often can manage it with diet and lifestyle, not necessarily always requiring medication. And in some situations, you can also reverse that and go into sort of a remission of sorts. And so, put very simply, someone with type 1 diabetes does not produce any insulin. And so they are reliant on insulin therapy to live. Really, it's life support. And with type 2 diabetes, they are either insulin resistant or they're not producing enough, but their pancreas is still producing insulin.
Mm-hmm. How he was 5 when he started, and I loved the way you talked about you're raising him to manage himself. I don't know that as parents we always think about it in that way, but how at what age did you start teaching him?
From the gate, we started teaching really at the hospital. And I think this is very temperament based. And so it depends on, kids are just little humans, just like we're all different size humans. And really from the gate at the hospital, we were involving him in it, because I was 2 weeks away from sending him to Pelican Elementary and back to kindergarten, and huge leap of faith to trust the other adults, really to keep him alive for me
Mhm.
during the day. And so certainly one of the proudest moments in that process was less than a week after diagnosis. And I have this heart-wrenching but inspiring photo of it. He gave himself his first shot in his stomach. And so he's just not even 40 pounds, little 5-year-old. And we just treated it not like a crisis, but just, this is something this is something that we're doing now. And so he was pretty quick to learn what he could do age appropriate. I still don't make him manage health insurance and filling prescriptions and navigating that whole system, but the daily care of his body, he is primarily in charge now with a little bit of prompting from mom because he's still 16.
Mhm. Did you, did you, during that time when you were going through that, I'm sure as a mom that was really scary for you to go through that experience, and he was really sick, I'm assuming. You
Mhm.
said mentioned the ER. Um, did you find that your stress level affected his mental health as well in that regard?
Definitely. And I think one of the greatest lessons that I've learned in the importance of just regulating my own emotions because emotions are contagious. And so his little face looking at me like, are we scared? Is this bad? It's almost midnight. We're at the emergency department. There's some intensity going on around us. And so I really knew, and I wrote a blog about this for Beyond Type 1 because I really do what I can to try to pave the way for people who are in that first day and in that first year. It's so incredibly overwhelming. And then it never gets easier, but it does become habitual. And so small kids in particular, if it was chaos and fear in the home, then that's how he was going to face down this new diagnosis and all these new daily burdensome tasks that were being added to him. So that definitely a crystal clear moment at the emergency department with him looking at me before they were getting ready to do his first insulin shot. And we said, this is why he won't love this if he watches this podcast, but it was a long time ago. This is why you've been wetting the bed. That's one of the very first signs that somebody is developing that type 1 diabetes is onsetting, is they're flushing sugar essentially through their urine. So often young kids will revert back to bedwetting. And so in his mind, he was so embarrassed about that. And he was so happy that we had figured out why he
Mm.
was wetting the bed. And so finding like little small age appropriate wins that this is hard. We're poking your finger. You're now getting 4 to 10 shots a day, plus 6 to 12 finger pokes a day, where most kindergartners, you're going to drag kicking and screaming for a routine vaccine, and then just tens of thousands of needles later.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So, but he really took charge of what he could do at the time really early on. And I've tried to bring him along with all of the advocacy and try to keep in mind that his body is not my project because I really like to I'm going to know everything about this. I don't like feeling helpless and such a helplessness with this diagnosis. So really in the first 6 months, Mike, I'm going to start the group. I'm going to give the speech. I'm going to write the blog. I'm going to join the hospital board. I'm going to do everything I can to become an expert in this matter. And then he's done a lot of that lately as well. And I'll bring him along. We do have done guest lectures for the OHSU nursing students to really bring that lived experience and debunk a lot of stereotypes about diabetes and what people can eat and what they can't. All they
Sure.
can't eat is poison, really.
Right. Right. They just have to manage it, right?
Right.
And there's things that you've probably learned.
Mhm.
Do have you always been good at regulating your emotions, or did you have to learn to do that through that process?
Definitely had to learn to do that. I have been told, and I think I'm a relatively intuitive person and can sometimes play off the energy in the room for better or for worse. Some of my greatest role models are people who can pause between something that happens and how they react to it. You don't have to do anything right now is usually the truth. There's a car coming and you need to move. Let's do something right now. But most of the time you can take a minute because those big emotions of the day are often look very different in the morning. So a work in progress. I would certainly not give myself a trophy for emotional regulation in any way, but that has been a huge part of it. And also trying to remain authentic and honest in that process and seeing it through his eyes as well. Because some of the things that for me were so painful, I have this photo that I took showing insulin pump and glucose monitor on the back of his arms. And I was so struck by, like, I made this body from scratch and he has to wear this for the rest of his life and his pancreas doesn't work. And he asked a question about, like, what's that face? Or why are you feeling sad? And when I showed him the picture, he said, look at my triceps. Like he doesn't even notice. And so everybody sees it differently. I know we'll talk about things besides diabetes, but he made a comment early on that, gosh, this diabetes is really taking a long time to go away. I was like, oh no, nobody told him this is permanent. And so now we're going to have that conversation that this isn't going to go away. This isn't like a cold. This isn't like catching the winter flu, that this is our new normal. And this is a weight that you're going to carry and learn how to manage.
Thing. And so that was 10, 11 years ago, it sounds
Hmm.
like. And you are now at Klamath Basin Behavioral Health,
Hmm.
which for the rest of the podcast, I'll say KBBH. Um, were you working there when he was diagnosed?
I was not. I was actually working for one of the local algae companies here. So I started at KBBH when they were actually KYDC, Klamath Youth Development Center. I was there from 2004 to 2009, did not come back from maternity leave, went and worked in private sector, went to graduate school. And so at the time that Finn was diagnosed, I had just given 30 days notice to New Earth Life Sciences, amazing company, the original algae company in Klamath County. And I was in a similar role, director of communications there, had just given 30 days notice because I'd been accepted into the business school at Southern Oregon University, was going back to pursue my MBA. And then Tuesday was Tuesday, Finn was diagnosed on St. Patrick's Day. My last day of the 30 days notice would be that Friday. So I missed that whole last week. And at the first endocrinologist appointment, we had Dr. Carrie Ganong here, very lucky to have her for the time we did. I said, I'm supposed to start graduate school next week. I just quit my job. I'm giving up health insurance. I'm in the middle of this huge life change. And she said, it's the perfect time to do that. Why wouldn't you do that on Monday morning? He'll be back in school. The school nurses will be looking out for him. You will have more time during the day in graduate school than if you're working an 8 to 5 job. So good luck with that program. You're going to do great. And so I still think back with what a huge role Dr. Ganong had in that process, because I was ready to retract my notice, drop out of the MBA program, and focus on managing this new chronic illness. So I wasn't there at the time, finished graduate school, and then went back to KBBH in 2017 in some
Okay.
sort of a communications role.
Oh, nice. So tell me about, well, let's talk a little bit about what it takes to go through all of that and get your MBA over there. How did you manage that?
Yeah, well, I
Being a
burned
mom's a
up
lot.
burned up my thyroid, had a genetic predisposition
Oh,
to that anyway, but really burned up my own endocrine system just from the stress of that time. And I was commuting to SOU. Have a great husband, amazing father, who does more than 50%. And so it really worked because the kids were in school during the day. And then my classes were either during the day or at night. So we really had a pretty frequent changing of guards. I had a lot of time to think while driving, and I had a lot of time to learn to let other people help me. I think a lot of us are, I want to help everyone, but I don't want anyone to help me. And so really had to put faith in other adults. And there was a team of people at home and around my child at school that, yeah, I agonized and stressed and very fearful over, but really learned how to let other people help. And I
mhm.
also had a 4-year-old at the time. And so balancing this quieter, introverted child who doesn't have this new diagnosis, what level of attention or feeling left out do I need to watch for with that, and with that kiddo? So trying to keep the balance of the whole world does not now revolve around Finn and type 1 diabetes, even though it can feel that way.
Yeah. How can people, and when I say in your community, I mean like your direct, like your family, your friends, that kind of thing. But how can communities show up for m- parents that are going through something like
Mhm.
this? What are some of the most helpful things you found?
Well, I think almost everything good happens in community. That's one of the focuses that we have at KBBH, is that healing and recovery happen in community, that community matters. We put a large focus and emphasis on peer support and individuals who are bringing their own lived experience. One of my favorite quotes, oh, I'll get her name wrong because I'm on the spot, Stephanie. where she says, I love when people who have been through hell walk out of the flames carrying buckets of water. That makes me emotional.
Don't make me cry,
Yeah.
Abby.
If we can laugh and we can cry today, then this will be a huge success.
Yeah.
But that really is it. And I had people walk out of hell carrying buckets of water for me.
Hmm. So
And so
beautiful.
feel really inspired to do that for other people. There's a lot of that at KBBH. There's a lot of that in the type 1 diabetes community. There's a lot of really active groups that just rally around someone who just got that. It's 3:00 in the morning and they're in the emergency department and they're Googling what is type 1 diabetes? What does this mean? What did I do? What did I eat when I was pregnant? Did I not stand naked under the moon, hopping on one foot? Did I let that lady touch his finger? Um, all those things that you go backwards and look at. And so you learn a lot from the medical community, but I don't think there's any level of education that will ever compare to being seen and heard by somebody who's been exactly where you are, whether they're there or they're on the other side of it. So now that I've composed myself, the quote is, I love when people who have been through hell walk out of the flames carrying buckets of water for those still consumed by the flames.
That's a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
We'll have to put that in the caption so that people can read
Yes.
it
And we'll
too.
get her name right. I'm sorry to her that I couldn't remember it in this moment.
That's awesome. So we've now started talking a little bit about
Hmm.
KBH, and mental health is a conversation I think that needs to be have a spotlight on it in our
Hmm.
community, but probably nationwide. Talk to me about that a little bit.
That's just our whole mission in the little team that I'm managing at KBBH. We have phenomenal clinicians and providers, people who are doing the treatment, who are taking care of the people who have sought treatment. On my team, we're really looking at the, excuse me, the prevention, education, and outreach element of that, primarily driven by destigmatizing. Your mental health is just as important as your physical health. You don't say, oh, I went to the doctor 3 years ago and that's how I know I'm healthy and fine. Like, it is something that needs to be cared for, but there is so much stigma around seeking behavioral health support, which includes substance use disorders and then also mental health challenges. No one is embarrassed if they break their arm. They're not, oh, I'm too embarrassed to go to the ED, or I'm going to go and not tell the truth that I took a corner too fast in my socks and slipped and fell. But there's all this shame and stigma that gets wrapped around addiction, substance use, and then also mental health challenges. Mental health challenges are incredibly normal and incredibly treatable. But the most important thing is that people can talk about it, and do that we all as a community can talk about. There shouldn't be shame associated with that. I would like to tell people at booths, well, I mean, if you had an axe in your head, would you go to the doctor? Right. So if you're having a panic attack or you're having delusions or you're experiencing either an acute or a chronic mental health challenge, there are people who are trained to help you with that. And there's nothing embarrassing about that.
Hmm. Um, is has mental health issues increased over the years, or do we are we just recognizing it more?
Oh, such a good question. The statistic hovers around 1 in 5 adults will experience a mental health challenge in their lifetime. Um, I think people would argue this point if it wasn't just you and I in the room. So I'll speak for myself, and my own opinion is that we're talking about it more, particularly in younger generations. And so young people are much more likely to say, I'm feeling anxious today. I'm feeling lonely, I'm feeling rejected. So I think we have younger generations coming up who are destigmatizing without even trying, just by their willingness to tell their own story. And then I think we also have people like Simone Biles and Michael Phelps, where you'll immediately think Olympians and Olympic champions, but Simone Biles opened a national conversation about panic and anxiety and nerves and her own mental health challenges with the whole globe watching her. And so that bravery to speak out can make us think, gosh, the whole world is getting sicker. And maybe that's true in different pockets, but I'm of the opinion that we're talking about it a lot more and we're moving the needle on destigmatizing, accessing those services.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting concept. I'm going to mull that over a
Okay.
little bit more. I
Yes.
like.
And also, to be fair and accurate, the pandemic was not great
Oh,
for mental health, and it was not great for social isolation and isolation. And, we've talked about community a bit already, but that disconnect from community can create acute and short-term mental health challenges. So I do think that the jury's out on what the pandemic did long term to children's mental health and to adults' mental health. Um, we have COVID babies, the kids that were not getting those social skills and the group dynamics in a normal school environment like they would had they been in school. So I do think there's a lot more to come on what will be the long-term impacts of that isolation, because loneliness and isolation are killers.
yeah. We're
Yeah,
meant to connect with each other,
we are meant
right?
to
In
be
one
connected.
way or another.
And there are introverts that will come in and say, I loved the pandemic. My younger son thrived during the pandemic. He's very introverted. He doesn't like crowds. My older son did not thrive and worked really hard to find community during that time. And I'll relate this back to behavioral health, because I do a lot of work in suicide prevention with my team. And suicide is a death of despair and people feeling burdened, like they're a burden, people feeling isolated, having chronic depression. And then, of course, the stigma of not speaking up about that. So my kids are very used to me being very comfortable talking about that, asking my nieces and nephews, it seems like you're struggling. There's a lot going on. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? There's a lot of resources, and just being that comfortable speaking of it. So, because of that, they have access to little You Matter to Klamath cards I have around. We have a youth line in Oregon. We have 988. We've got all these great resources. And so, my son, who was a sixth grader during the pandemic, was finding his community through video games, not unlike a lot of teenagers. He was in a Fortnite group with some older kids and then was removed from that group, probably I'm not sure, due to his age. He told me a couple weeks later that he called. I'm a little nervous about telling this story because I don't know if he'll watch this. Finn, forgive me. We have discussed that we have to advocate and talk about things because it gives other people permission to do the same. So he called that lifeline, not because he was feeling suicidal, but because he was feeling isolated and lonely, quite frankly, and talked to the woman who answered the phone about not being a part of this group, not having the friend group that he wanted to have. And she talked him through, what do you love? Harry Potter and basketball. And that is such an important illustration that I share in my suicide prevention trainings, because sometimes it's just about that. It's just about making that connection and feeling heard. And you don't have to be in a suicidal crisis to reach out and get support. That it really can be all about prevention and taking those early steps when you're struggling.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about the stigma, but I've heard people say they don't want to talk about suicide because of what if it puts an idea in somebody's head. Have
Right.
you heard that?
I have heard that. And that's actually a myth. We do a lot of evidence based trainings, the primary one being question, persuade, refer. Millions of people have been trained on that. It's very comparable to CPR, but for suicide prevention and intervention. And that's very much a myth where they say, I don't want to bring it up because what if they think I'm suggesting it or I'm planting that idea? The fact is, someone is either thinking about suicide or harming themselves, or they are not. And the more comfortable you get asking them, what I found, I'll try to really speak for myself. What I found is that there is a relief when you ask the question and a pretty quick answer. So I have had people say, yes, I am. And I've been thinking about it for a long time. And then now we can have a conversation, or immediately like, oh gosh, no, I'm having a terrible day, but my mind's not going there. Like I can get past this.
Yeah.
So I just encourage people to ask the question. If something's off, then just ask. And in my experience is that people answer you pretty quickly and pretty truthfully.
Yeah. Interesting. What are do you have a good feel for what are the um, top couple of mental health issues that are really affecting Klamath County
hmm
more?
Yeah, I think in the mental health, I think depression, anxiety, driven by stress, isolation, and loneliness. Um, I think those are the top ones. KBBH has data on that. We could look at what are the primary diagnoses here per age group, but overall, depression and anxiety are far more common than a severe mental illness like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder.
Mhm.
And then also our county suffers pretty severely from substance use and an addiction crisis. And that falls under that umbrella of behavioral health where you have mental health and then you also have substance use. And so we see a lot of substance use disorders, and we've got some great providers in addition to KBBH that are really working to address that in our community as well.
It's easy to get lost. Don't know which path to take, what to post. In the social media jungle, video is king. Your kids are obsessed, your customers are addicted, we're all hooked, and social media sites prioritize videos. So when you're ready to stand out from the crowd, reach out to 40 Deuce Films. Feeling over everything.
Does it affect a specific population more than others? Like, let's say drug abuse. Does it?
I mean, I would say adolescent and older, we focus a lot of our prevention efforts on adolescents. We just recently came off two really fabulous events. We partnered with the YMCA and also with Ella Redkey Pool to create what are called protective childhood experiences. A lot of people, particularly in behavioral health and even in medical communities, have heard of an ACE score, an adverse childhood experience score. You answer, I think, 10 questions. Every point is an adverse childhood experience. The more points you have, the more connected you are to long-term negative outcomes, both physically and mentally. What people don't talk about as much, and what we're working really hard to do, is counter those with pieces, protective childhood experiences. And so those can be social groups that you belong to, having a really positive mentor, having something better to do. And so we have done great events at the YMCA and at Ella Redkey just recently, trying to create better things to do, things that are fun, that do not involve substances. And so that age group has a lot of prevention work targeted at it. But I think addiction, substance use does not discriminate, and mental health does not discriminate. It's all genders, it's all ages, it's all backgrounds,
Absolutely. Um,
all income statuses.
I, it affects everybody. I
Hmm.
think that's probably one of the pieces of stigma
Hmm.
that you're probably trying to overcome a little bit.
Very
And
much.
that is my guess.
We could walk out on the street and ask the first 10 people that we see, how has your life, your friends, or your family been impacted by substances and addiction? I think we would have zero not at alls.
I think that that's true. For a long time, it has felt like alcohol use has obviously been more accepted
Hmm.
than, and maybe that's been a little bit harder for people to go and ask for help on because of that socially accepted, the level of social acceptance, I guess.
Hmm.
Is that starting to change a little bit? Or people starting to recognize that that could be an issue more often?
I think so. And some of the stigma and the socially accepted use does get wrapped up in what's legal, what's not legal, what is Oregon doing compared to what the rest of the country is doing. But the data does not lie that alcohol is an absolute destroyer of families and killer of people, just like a lot of narcotics and other drugs. The root of that is addiction. It's highly addictive. It changes behavior, it changes judgment, and then it can also be generational.
Mhm.
Substance use disorders can be generational as well. So I do think it's changing, but I think we're thousands of years into accepted use. And there's also a spectrum. There are people who can socially consume alcohol and are not suffering from addiction. There are other
Sure.
people who, from that very first drink, it hits them different and they are entering a path of substance use disorders and addiction. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I do think it's
It's,
changing, but things change very, very slowly. So, good actions and right intentions, you may not see the dividends of that for years.
yeah.
It's not easy to change how people think.
I was thinking just in the last couple of years at some of our events, the gala in particular, uh, about 3 years ago, I started getting requests to have fancier non-alcoholic drinks available,
Mhm.
or even having non-alcoholic beer available and having those options. And I remember one person asked me, now there's like a couple dozen people that ask for it. And I was just reading an article about there's actually a famous singer, and I'm going to forget her name, but she opened a bar in Nashville, but they don't serve alcohol. And I thought that was an interesting concept. It made me wonder if things were starting to shift.
That is such a great point. I saw that same article. I also can't remember who opened that, but I am seeing that shift with a wider variety of non-alcoholic beverages at alcohol serving establishments here. And I think let's normalize designated drivers. Let's normalize not asking why you're not drinking. What do you want to drink? A glass of water? Great.
Mhm.
Um, you don't need to ask, are you pregnant?
Yeah.
Or like, why is it that you're not drinking today? So normalizing that and then allowing people to still have that social environment. I think a lot of people are seeking that community and connectedness. And often you find that in bars, especially for younger. I mean, I did my time in my 20s hanging out in bars here locally. And so I think people seek that connection, and then it's very normalized and having alcohol be a part of that. So yeah, inviting people in, including them, whether they're drinking in that environment or not.
Yeah.
You see that at weddings a lot. I think that's a great example.
Mhm.
There's people are going to hit the dance floor inebriated or not.
Yes,
Yeah, that you can
absolutely.
have that social connectedness still.
The designated driver part that you mentioned this morning on the news, or the on the news, I just saw something about I'm pretty sure it was a professional sports arena, and they've started, if you're a designated driver, you get free soda the whole time for your
Mhm.
group. And that, both of those, the bar in Nashville and that, makes me wonder what the community could do, or some of the things the community can do to help support better mental health in, and whether that's related to substance abuse or not. But what could a community do?
Mhm. I think the community can normalize. I think the community can talk about it, normalize who's the designated driver, not so different than what you just mentioned with the bar that's opening. Some people love the taste of beer but are no longer consuming alcohol. So let's normalize having really great non-alcoholic IPAs for people who enjoy that, having fancy drinks for people who are not planning on consuming any alcohol that night. But overall, most importantly, talking about it, sharing your own experiences, being comfortable asking questions, and then just being non-judgmental of the choices that people are making. And that includes choices that people are making about consuming alcohol. Not everybody who consumes alcohol is suffering from addiction.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so just really letting the judgment slip away and creating inclusive environments for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And talking about it.
Absolutely. We've talked, like, there's treatment options in here, and you talked a little bit about prevention
Mhm.
and specifically suicide prevention. But are there ways to prevent depression and those anxiety and all of that? Is there things that can be done on prevention on that side?
Yeah, I think you can really take care of your mental health really early on. And it's simple. It's simple things. It's talking about your feelings, not isolating, recognizing in yourself when you are isolating or you're experiencing anxiety, and then learning what relieves that for you. For some people, it's fresh air, it's going for a walk. Sometimes it's talking to people. Sometimes it's figuring out ways to build some self care into your time. And sometimes it's seeing a professional who can help you identify that's an intrusive thought. Those are thinking errors. You're worrying about something. How can we manage the angst around that and talk through it?
Hmm.
Mhm.
I want to talk about the business a little bit of KBBH, because it's really grown, I think, in recent years, and is providing even more services
Mhm.
to people. Do you want to talk a little bit about the business of KBBH?
Sure. So the business of we're a nonprofit. Klamath Basin Behavioral Health is the designated community mental health program in Oregon. Every county has one, and so we're contracted with Oregon Health Authority to do that work. And up until 2013, it was a children and families mental health center. And then when that CMHP, or Community Mental Health Program contract, came to KBBH, Stan Gilbert was at the helm at that time. That opened all adult services to what was a children and family focused clinic. And KBBH from 2013 to 2020, I would say grew almost 400%, both in staff size and the number of people served, which makes sense when you look at if you're serving 18 and under and their family members and not doing substance use disorder services, how quickly that expands when you bring in all of the adult services and all of the services that are under that contract. Really social safety net services for the community, not so different than kinds of work that Klamath County Public Health does.
Okay. Um, and you guys have hired a lot of people recently.
Mhm.
What's it been like trying to recruit people to Klamath Falls?
Well, it's been difficult and it's also been really fun. And we've brought a lot of people in from other areas. COVID was a good recruiting time for us because people were looking at moving to smaller areas and getting out of cities and crowded areas. We also have really focused on growing our own. We do tuition reimbursement. We also do scholarship programs. We partner with KCC and also with Oregon Tech
Mhm.
so that we have people who are interested in this field. They're working in some level at KBBH and they want to be a therapist or they want to be a drug and alcohol counselor. We have a lot of pathways to really help develop our own professionals. And then we're always selling Klamath Falls outside of the area. And I think we have people in every single program who have relocated here from other states.
Do they love it here once they move here?
They do love it here. It can be a bit of a culture shock, and we've learned to ask those kinds of questions if we have somebody who's moving from a very urban area and they've never maybe seen snow before, and maybe they've romanticized like this will be like a Hallmark movie, and Main Street is so cute and Main Street is adorable and we have all this charm in our community. But if they're used to going down the block and going to Target or being 20 minutes from an airport, so we've learned to be really honest about the charm, the outdoor life, the people, the community, all the movers and shakers that are doing great things in this area. Fabulous air base that's bringing in phenomenal people to our community. We have great educators. We have great leaders across all sectors. And so we've learned to be really honest about that, everything that's good, and also things that we've learned from individuals who have moved here that maybe are single and want to know what's the social life here? Where will I go and meet people? And so we really encourage joining. Find a club. If you go to church, let's start helping you figure out where your congregation is here. If you love the outdoors, you're all set. That's not even hard for us to give you a great list of places to go and check out. But really learning somebody can move here and love the town for all of its many attributes. But if they don't get connected and they don't feel like a part of the community and they're not establishing connections and relationships, that will affect their long-term happiness
Yeah.
being in this area. But recruiting is very hard. And the Oregon Health Authority has tried to help community mental health programs. There's an overall workforce shortage in behavioral health. And so there's a lot of great programs. There's no lack of interest in that area. There's a shortage in people finishing those programs and holding the licensing that they need to do to provide therapeutic services. So we're really approaching that from all angles. We have a great CHRO and recruitment and retention specialist. They make a lot of personal contacts with individuals, but then we also work very hard on the back end that we're growing our own and we're creating a soft place to land when people do move to Klamath Falls.
Oh, I like that. So we're going to get close to the end of our time, but I know it goes fast. But I can't not ask you what made you want to be a city council person?
Yes, I love that question. And I don't know that I have a super clean answer to that. I think I'll go back to something that my husband said to me, which is that I get very blue in the face about things that don't really affect my day. And that several years ago shifted my thinking on really thinking global, but acting local. Um, and I really looked back at emotions or feelings or energy that I had had around things that might be happening on a national or global level. But what was I doing here? What was I doing for the city of Klamath Falls? What was I doing for the school district for Klamath County? And so I have a lot of skin in the game. I'm raising kids that are going to city schools. My husband and I owned MC's on Main, a downtown business, 3 different locations on Main Street. For almost 20 years, we still own MC's on Main. We work closely with the base for food service there. Um, Live and work like really within this triangle of city limits, but wasn't putting any of my time into making my immediate surroundings better. Um, I'm not a politician. I wouldn't describe myself as a politician, but I was approached by a group of strong women that said, have you ever considered running for city council? I'm like, no, not at all. I've never considered that. And I'm not a politician. I don't know anything about wastewater treatment plants. I mean, some of the stuff that we have experts on, City of Klamath Falls is full of brilliant minds who cared really deeply about making this a better place. And I looked at past notes, I watched past meetings, like, how could I vote on millions of dollars for the wastewater treatment plant? But moving that toward, I think we need people who have skin in the game and who are living life right now, who are super invested in making this a better place for small business, a better place to raise kids, a better place to recruit top talent from other areas to come work here. Um, and then I thought really deeply about this great article and book called The Confidence Gap. And it's around women in leadership, and that it's not a competence gap, it's a confidence gap. And so the statistic in that is that in general, if women meet 100% of the qualifications, they'll go ahead and take that leap. Where if men meet 60% of the qualifications, they're like, I can do the majority of that and I know what I'm doing. And so I'm going to apply for that job, or I'm going to file for that local city council seat. But the confidence comes really from taking the action. And so, yeah, I just challenged myself to a new learning curve. Like, I certainly don't know everything about municipal government, but my intentions are in the right place. I'm smart enough to learn, and I'm motivated enough to learn and to ask people questions around the things that I don't understand. And I think I have the right intentions of making this a better place for everybody who's living and working and playing here like I am.
I love that. I started a whole women's event because I believe in the power of women being involved and supporting each other and
Mhm.
speaking up, because sometimes I'm like, you are absolutely have the voice to do it. You're just a little afraid to do it.
Right.
So I'll recommend a book to you.
Yes, please.
Women Don't Ask. It was a book by a couple of researchers that looked at some of the things that we as women do, why we aren't getting paid as much.
Mhm.
And it's a pretty fascinating book. So
Oh, that's so related. I will write that down and
I
read
probably
it.
have a copy.
I would love to borrow it.
Jennifer Scanlon actually referred that to me like 8 years ago, and I've given away so many copies of that book. But along those lines, it's a lot of times men will ask for how much money they want from the get-go,
Mhm.
and a woman will accept what she's offered, and then hope that they'll see her value and then give her the raise. Where men are just like, nope, this is how much I want.
Yes. Okay.
So
So these books go together because that's a whole theme in The Confidence Gap, which is like 2014, 15, but it does touch on pay equity and how women are less likely to negotiate
yes,
from the start and think exactly what you just said. Well, when I get there, they'll see my value and then I'll be compensated differently. And I did a whole graduate school project on this and recreated it in my MBA cohort, where it was about half men and half women. And I passed out pink slips and blue slips, and I had them write on the slip what they thought their worth was 5 years after finishing their MBA. And then I collected all of those, put them up on the board and averaged them. And danged if the difference wasn't 20%.
Yeah.
It was a 20%. So we can't blame the corporations and the business owners. Nobody is intentionally saying, oh, great, there's a female, I can save myself 20%. Nobody's doing that on purpose, that it is a confidence gap. And we do it to ourselves
Yeah.
in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, I think a couple of other things that are related to that in that book was like men have generally have no problem saying I did X, Y, and Z, but we just want to be noticed. We want you to just naturally notice the work that we put in. And then there was some things about how we're raised. Like not
Mhm.
a lot of us don't know how to negotiate and don't feel comfortable doing it. So
Right.
we'll
Right.
have
Many
to,
of us took home ec in high
yes.
school. We weren't reading books like Getting to Yes and learning how to collaborate and negotiate with people.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to bring you back on to talk about that.
Not easy to do. Not easy to bring me back to topic. You're doing great.
No, I mean like on another podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've covered a lot of ground. But thank you for being here today and for sharing about the work that you do and for serving on City Council. I have a couple of questions, fun ones at the end. But one I want to know is there something you're really proud of as a City Council person so far?
Really proud of. I am very proud. So, City Council doesn't act alone. I don't do anything as Abbie. We're a group of 5 and we're working with the city manager. I am really proud of how effective municipal government can be and how accessible people are. And I think if you're reading comments on Facebook or you're reading articles in the paper and you haven't taken any action to get involved, I think people would be surprised how accessible everyone is. And I'm really proud of the people who show up for public comment because that works. That if your constituents don't come up and tell you what's bothering them, what they love, what they want more of, what they want less of, it's a missed opportunity for the city and the counselors to communicate. And it's a missed opportunity for people to have a voice in government. So, in a town of this size, I'm proud of the accessibility, the really big brains that the city recruits to run utilities and the contracts with the base and the work they're doing in housing. But yeah, I'm proud of the people who get involved, and I'm proud that the process works. And there are many times we get there and nobody is there for public comment, but I know there's concerns because I read a post on Facebook that had 600 comments on it. So
Yeah.
I would encourage people, it's not that scary. Everybody's just a person trying to do their best in that moment. So show up and have a voice, and I think people will be surprised how effective that can be in small government.
Yes. Exclamation point on that. If I gave you $250,000 to do something by the end of the day to make a difference here, what would you do?
Oh, I have one day.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm super inspired by crowdsourcing. Like I will cry. I love to laugh and I love to cry over meaningful things, but I will cry at GoFundMe's of people I've never met and causes that I'm not involved in because the power of crowdsourcing. This is, and I'll relate this back to how to use the 250,000. If I had one day, I think I would do a super quick social media campaign and try to double that money because once like people who give $5, people who give $10, and then all of a sudden you have 1,000 people who have done that. So I think I would run a fast and furious campaign trying to get people to match it. I have $250,000 and try to get people to put in something to have it matched. And then, gosh, it's both so much money and so little money, depending on the scale of what you're trying to do. I would probably look at who is small and doing big things. The Senior Center, Citizens for Safe Schools, Integral Youth Services, Klamath Tribe's prevention team doing phenomenal work. So I think I would look at who's small, not a large system, because a small amount of money can go so much further in a small environment like that. And then if I had any left over, I think I'd probably still have 50,000 left. I think I would find people who are struggling to make ends meet. Most of us are 2 months away from poverty, and $1,000 can mean everything to one person and nothing to the next person. So I think I would look at small, like not loans, but like micro donations. Are you 3 months behind in bills? Okay, now you're not.
I like that.
That's fun.
Very good. Tell me about one of your role models.
One of my role models, gosh, a specific individual doesn't immediately come to mind. I've had some really strong female leaders. Amy Boyven, I love how calm she is in a storm. And if I would attribute, we don't have to do anything right now to someone, it would be to Amy Boyven. She has that ability to think through before reacting. And I think more than a specific person, I just really love specific qualities. Love people who speak truth to power, say the uncomfortable thing. And then I love funny people. I love quick witted, funny people. I immediately are like, you're smart and I trust you.
That's awesome. Can you tell me someone you think is really funny that I would know?
Someone who's really funny that you would know. I think Mika Blaine is funny.
She is funny.
She's so smart. Mika Blaine is funny. Gosh, who makes me just giggle? Chloe Say is funny. She was one of your speakers at the Women in Leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chloe Say is really funny. She makes me laugh. And then there's a few people on our substance use disorder services team. There's some funny people on that team too. Gosh, I wish I
Good.
could think when I drive
No,
away.
that's okay. I put you on the
Yeah,
spot.
when
a
I
little
drive
bit.
away, I'll think of the funniest
You're
person
going to
I've
start
ever met.
sending me
Mhm.
messages of all the people. And then the last question, if you were aligning the best day in Klamath Falls, like maybe you had people coming into town, what would be your perfect Klamath County day?
Oh, perfect Klamath County day. Well, my gut instinct was to talk about being introverted on the weekend because I talk for a living. Everything is words and feelings for me. So I like to stay home and take a nap and work on a puzzle and scroll social media, but that wouldn't be a great house guest event. So if they had never seen Klamath Falls, I would definitely grab my husband because he's much more of an adventurer, knows the county. We would hit Crater Lake where I worked in high school. So that's very nostalgic for me. I love Chiloquin. I grew up in Chiloquin. I like to take people out to that area. There's so many beautiful areas, probably the lava beds to bookend the whole county. Downtown, I would hope that it was Third Thursday. If it wasn't Third Thursday, I would hope it was Saturday market day. Fair is a great day. So probably depending on the time of year, but I think I would take people to trees and water and where small places where people gather to really get a heart for the community.
Great answer. Thank you for your time. And thank you to our producer, 40 Deuce Films.